someone to watch.
Oh,
My daughter said my daughter's in Melbourne, and so she said that looks really good. So, yeah.
it's automatically on each
Yeah,
side.
right.
Yes.
Looking forward, looking back, I've come a long way down the track, got a long way left to go, making songs from what I know, making sense of what I've seen. Looking I've come a long way down the track, got a long way left to go, making sure what I know.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Just letting you know that if you'd like to have a tea or coffee, there's tea and coffee over here, and we'll get the memorial service going in the next 5 minutes or so. Let's go. It's nearly past 11. It's quarter past. 2 minutes. 2 minutes. We got 8 minutes. Yeah, I know. 2 minutes. I mean, that one. Good morning, everybody, friends and family from near and far. Welcome to a memorial, a celebration of the life of John Bruce Crawford, a person who I know we all agree had a life that was well lived, a man who provided service to family, to agriculture, to business and the community. My name's Alistair Dow. I'm John's brother-in-law. I welcome all of you here, people who've known John since they were in nappies together pretty much, through to people who've known John more recently. One of John's great strengths was his ability to maintain friendships over distance and also to appear from Esperance, which is over 2,000 kilometres away, when he was needed by his family. Yesterday, there were 200 people who gathered in Esperance to farewell John, to remember him, and his remains today will be interred alongside his wife Sue at the Esperance Cemetery. We especially want to acknowledge his family in Western Australia, daughter Deanne, son Stephen and Tim, and daughter-in-law Pia. Also, he was the grandfather of Jamie Lee, Isabella and Taylor, and great-grandfather of Noah and Ryder. We're also live streaming this service nationally and internationally, and I've also already had some feedback about the quality of the vision, thank you very much. We've got people from all over the world looking at this online, and it will remain online for a while. So if you want to review it, look at it again, just search for John Bruce Crawford, and it will be available online for the next couple of weeks. Today we're going to have 5 speakers. We'll start in a moment with Jan Crawford. Then Richard and Rose will talk about John's life. Don Oliver, who's a school friend from Erbray, will say a few words, and Kerry Hughes will say a few words on behalf of the Hughes family. So without any further ado, I'll invite Jan to come up and say her prayer.
Hi, I'm Jan, John's sister-in-law. I would like us to take a moment to reflect on John. John's passing was so unexpected, with no warning and no time for goodbye. We must not be sad, as John's spirit is free of worry and free to roam. His spirit will visit all of us with a gentle touch, and as we remember, being here, John was here. Last time I did this, John was here. May John enjoy his time with the angels as he tries to organise them, as he did try to organise a few of us. So, in the name of the Almighty, hail and farewell, beautiful man. Amen. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan. And thank you for all the support you've offered our family over 10 years now, over 10 years. All that has been achieved with Richard, it's really quite extraordinary. And I know that John would want me to say thank you to you as well for those heartfelt words. And even though he wasn't religious, he'd really like that. He is free now. Thank you to the warm welcome that you always gave John at Ardith and at the Links. And I know he was usually there with voluntary work commitments, but he loved the company. And he loved the high-prize guest room that has been dedicated to him and bears his name, and his presence there will always be cherished. Thank you.
Yes, we've had some pretty good speakers, but anyway, it's my turn. Just so I'll start off and then Rose will butt in and tell more yarns. Anyway, wherever John, I'm just going to read the first line. Wherever John went, he left his mark, and it was a good feeling. I still find it hard that he's gone. Not like me, with 9 lives. I just remember when he was sick, at any rate, he never... I can remember when John never was sick, at any rate, he never had time, always on the go, different projects and things to do and places to see. And then I'll start off with
growing up with John was an adventure, and I wasn't there for the first 10 years of it really, but I've learnt some stories, and Richard's going to share some of those early adventures with John.
Anyway, the first one I was going to bring up was Mr. Wenham's tree. Well, there was a scrub block up the back of us, and we used to visit that quite often, and it was always one of John's favourite places. But anyway, the Lunnies and us, we were heading off up to the scrub years ago, and the rain came in, and it really started to rain, so and Mum had packed our lunch for us. We used to take a hot dog, a Milo tin for boiling the kettle and cooking the hot dogs, and some bread. And anyway, this rain had come in, and we got halfway up, and we decided we'd head back. And anyway, we camped in Mr. Wenham's gum tree on the way back and lit a bonfire in there. And anyway, we thought we'd put out the fire when we left, but we didn't, because the tree fell down. And Mr. Wenham, he was so cross, but he didn't know that we'd done it. Anyway, he came over and sort of saw it. He said, you know, that lovely big gum tree where, you know, a heap of us could camp in, it's gone, it's fallen down. And actually, it's just about all burned up. And he said, if I ever catch the people who burnt that bloody tree down, I'm going to give them a hurry up. And John was pretty quick off the mark. It was a bit of a thunderstorm around. And John said, oh, lightning's probably hit it. And they wrote, Mr. Wenham still never knew to this day, oh, it's gone now, what really happened to that tree. But we were the culprits. Back years ago, my father had a couple of good war mates, 3 good war mates. It was Ray Harris, Kev Beer and Dad. And they come down to the farm every now and again. And when they did, the yabbies were on the go, and the creek was pretty good fun. We'd go down in the creek, and the first thing people would all lose their rubber boots or shoes, be stuck in the quicksand. We'd stick in the binder twine with a bit of meat on them to catch the yabbies, and then probably fall in the water, but everybody used to come back pretty wet after the day down the creek. And at any rate, the man folk, they used to play bowls, and they come back at the night, and Mum would make paths and all that for us. And we'd sit down and have a jolly good meal with an entree of yabbies followed. And then there was Elizabeth Lunny. We had a house cow called Brewer, and then Elizabeth loved horses. but we didn't have horses. Anyway, we decided to get the house cow and we put her in the pen where we used to milk her, and it used to have a bale in there. Anyway, we put Elizabeth on the top of it, but it's in a tin shed, so she more or less had to lie flat on the cow and hang on to the horns. Anyway, we let go of the pin and the bale fell out, the cow backed out. Elizabeth went about 100 mile per hour for about 300 yards and hit either Fairchild's or Kerr's fence. But she didn't fall off, but I think she was a bit shaken. With the Lunny boys, we're really all blood brothers, really, but I won't go into that. But we used to head off down the creek, and Dad always had a spare bottle of beer, and he had fags in the back of the boot, and we'd go down there and have a puff and that at the creek and try and catch a few yabbies. But Dad never really missed any of his beer or his fags. He used to buy them in the carton full and stick them in the back of in the boot of the car. And then there was the school bus. We're travelling home once, but I've never really ever known a school bus ever to get a flat tyre, but we did. And anyway, all the kids got out and we all go for a hammer in the hand, change the tyre, and we got the jack out underneath the seat. It was all locked up back when he first started. But anyway, we got out and changed the tyre, and Ray thanked us all for doing the job. Then we put the jack back underneath the back of the seat, and the padlock didn't go on on where the jack went. So anyway, I don't know whether it's John or I, we got the jack out. We put it under the back seat. There was a back seat where only 2 or 3 people could sit on. And we gave her a bit of a jack, and next minute it popped out. And Ray Hamlin, the kid said, "Oh, those bloody the Crawford boys have jacked the seat out of the bus." And anyway, Ray Hamlin said, "I've had enough of you Crawford boys bringing fags onto the school bus. And now I reckon the back seat, I'm going to catch up with your father tonight." He was actually chairman of school council back there then. And anyway, we had a pretty sleepless night. I think we're sort of talking a bit about it. Anyway, next morning we get up for breakfast, and Dad really didn't really say much, except Dad was a great one for bribery. He said, "What I'm going to do with you boys, I'm going to give you 50 quid each, that's back when the quid days were going. And so I'm going to give you 50 quid each if you don't smoke until you're 21. And if I catch you, you won't get your 50 quid. We never ever caught us. But, I turned 21 and was just having a beer before my party. John said I could do with $50, we'd charge $2 back there in between that time. And he said I could do with a bit of money, and Dad had gone out the room, and John and I were talking, and I said, "Right, I'll ask Dad." And I said to Dad, "Oh yeah, what about that 50 quid you owe us?" And Dad said, "I thought you might bring that up." He said, "Do you know how much that seat cost to fix on the school bus?" So that was that. We never got paid. Yeah, Dad was a great one for bribery. Oh, is this yours or mine?
Oh, well.
No, you.
Yeah. Dad was a great one for bribery, which was quite effective, as we've just heard. And Mum would either chase us around the house with a broom, or after a late night out and a misadventure, usually with some damage to a car, we'd return home with the toilet light on. And she'd always say, "As long as you're okay, we'll talk about it in the morning." And so, yeah, our parents were great role models for us as children and a big influence. Dad was an extremely hard worker, and he was determined to be a good provider. And all of us adopted that, but John in particular. John also embraced some of Mum's interests, her love of the world, cooking, gardening, and even family history. And the gardening, I know Shelley can attest to this, because he'd always go up north of Esperance and look at the wildflowers in the spring. And if he was here at Normanville, he would look at any opportunity to get down to Raywood Nursery. And that's how they kind of came together. They were dedicated, our parents, to community service, but there was also relaxation and fun, and often that was around sport. Sport was a big part of our lives, whether it was watching the cricket, listening to the Sandful, and we all had our own teams. Dad had been a Norwood supporter because he'd stayed with the Gamblings when he was growing up, and by the time the boys got to choosing a team, we had our own family member, Brian, playing for North Adelaide. So both Richard and John became ardent North Adelaide supporters, so thank you, Brian. Golf and tennis, tennis in particular, it was a big part of our social life as well. We had a lot of fun on and off the court, and there are people here, Mick and Clem, who know some of the stories, but we'll save them for later. By the time Western Australia was John's home and Sue was on the scene, John became a sand groper. And although we can credit Sue and her family for this, the West Coast Eagles did have a hand in it as well. And I know when the AFL finally adopted the Crows, I know Richard and Dad and I were kind of hoping, oh yes, John he'll support the Crows, but nah, it was also always the Eagles. My memories of Richard and John as children are limited because I'm so much younger. And we've heard some of the stories, which I hadn't heard those stories. I had not heard about the seat being jacked up until we were preparing this. But I do remember the photos. There's one where they would take quite a bit of pre-work, and Richard and John could tell of the curlers, and not just my hair, in their hair, and clips, and they would stay in place for some hours before the photos were taken. I think it was a real relief when I came on the scene that they didn't have to worry so much about Mum's fussing. And they could get on with the important work of being farmers. As a boy, John was always thinking and making sense of the world around him. He wasn't easily fooled, and there was an inbuilt kindness to his personality. And in a short memoir that my father wrote, he said, "We used to do a daily run around the cattle during calving and castrate the bull calves. John, 4 years old, was told we were taking out their tonsils. And when he heard his cousin Christopher was having his tonsils out, he said, 'Oh, poor Christopher.' His curiosity and determination to make a success of life led to a great deal of investigating and trial and error. And he boarded in Adelaide for 5 years as he completed his Herb Ray certificate, and some of his schoolmates are here today. Our father was at Herb Ray, and he was delighted, John, that James, who was named the 2019 Farmer of the Year, and Jess were following in both Dad's and John and Richard's footsteps. So maybe we might ask to get Don to come out now and say about Herb Ray, if you wanted to.
Absolutely. Don, where's Don?
Yeah, there.
Hi everyone, mine will be pretty short, but I'm unofficially on behalf of the Airbray boys. We only really knew John for the 2 years that we spent time with him at Airbray, but we were the first class to do, or the first time they did this certificate in agriculture, and that course is still going today. But Crawford was one of the integral parts, a really great mate in there, and we absolutely loved everything and the time we spent with him. We did catch up with him a few times because my wife is related to him, and he'd call in and we actually went and saw him in 2016. And I've got to say he was a great guy at school and a very successful guy in business, albeit he had a little bit of bad luck. I don't need to worry about that part of it, but you know, he was a successful farmer, and then he turned himself into being a successful manufacturer, doing the stuff with colour bond and bending it, and maybe that was part of he learnt that in sheet metal, you guys, when it wasn't all wasted on us. But he was really quite a character, and we absolutely loved him, and it's really sad to see him gone. Thank you.
Okay, now we're going to share some of the examples of just some of those early innovations. Karen, in the eulogy that she gave yesterday, so Karen Austin was John's sister-in-law and has known him very well for all of his life while he's been in WA. She makes a comment there that he was a Queen Scout and he was always prepared. He was always prepared with whatever, and so we were very grateful for that. Richard's just going to tell the raising geese story.
Yeah, John was a bit of a bird lover. He had, firstly he had budgies, and Mum would tell him to clean out the cage, and John would wander outside. There flies a budgie to freedom, but they were all called Georgies. I don't know how many budgies John went through for a start, but whenever the cage was cleaned out, the budgies would fly away to freedom. And then he started off with pigeons. He got pigeons, and we used to go for a bit of a drive on Sunday, and he'd get Dad, Mum and he'd stay home, and he wanted to wait until the pigeons come home. He'd like to get the times, but we used to go down to Rapper Bay or Oponga Bay or out to Waipinga and let these pigeons go, and John would be home ready to see how long they'd taken. Well, the first couple of times we did it right, but Dad decided to stop and we had about 4 pigeons he used to let go, and so we streamed them out, and of course they all came home at different times, and John wasn't very happy. He reckons there's something going on, but anyway, that was just the way with the pigeons. And then there was the geese. I don't know how many geese he had, but Mum had sort of just about stopped hitting us with a broomstick and taken on chasing the geese, because they used to make the cement all dirty and Steve Martin should be out there throwing a broom around at the geese instead of us boys. We used to play tennis against the wall and hit golf balls down from the top paddock, and the tennis ball would go through the toilet window and Mum would be on the loo. Out she come to the broom cupboard, chasing us boys around the house, and then and then the golf ball would come down, bounce on the cement, and as Mum was going to the broom cupboard, and then Mum chased us around the house, and she had a favourite word, I'm going to spifficate you boys. If I catch you boys, I'm going to spifficate you. That was a big word, Mum. But anyway, she never used to catch us. And she'd be out of breath, and she'd say, wait until Dad comes home. But Dad never ever punished us. He never laid a hand on us, actually, with all the trouble we used to get up to. But going back to the geese, the geese used to roam a bit. They'd go over into Kerrs or Fairchild's there, and I think it was Fairchild's. And anyway, Uncle Kev come down. Dad promised Uncle Kev a couple of geese for Christmas. And anyway, Uncle Kev turns up, and we had to kill him and that. So John sends the dogs off. Out the paddock they go, and the geese didn't really fly until they came to a fence, and they hopped over, and the dogs stayed behind them. Anyway, brought them right into the sheep yards. The geese run into the sheep yards, and John got on the grafting race and started to graft a few off, and Uncle Kev came up and, stop, he said. And John said, what did stop it for? He said, I'm coming back next week and I'm going to bring the movie camera. We have to put this on film. So, anyway, Uncle Kev came down the following week, done the movie. Do you want to talk about Ginger, or shall I keep it on going about the artificial?
Yeah, well, I can do that if you like. Yeah. John found out about AI. There's different interpretations of what AI is now, but you know, back in the 70s, it was artificially inseminating your cattle, cows, and he got a certificate. Karen found it the other day, and so I remember coming home from school, and you know, we had sheep mainly, and the house Jersey, and then suddenly there's these big Charolais cows and Simmenterals, he had about half a dozen different types, and he was artificially inseminating them, and you know, with a degree of success, but it wasn't something that we saw for the long term. It was just like maybe a 1 or 2 year project, perhaps.
You had the Hereford Freeze across and Mr. Cross.
Right, yeah. Maybe. Yeah. But yeah, you know, extraordinary that he would be doing that. And what about the calculator?
Oh, the calculator.
Yeah. You tell that one. Yeah. Did you remember that one? I didn't remember.
Oh, right. Well, on the world trip, John travelled all over Europe, England and everywhere, but he did go to Japan. And anyway, Dad went away to the war and fought the Japs and that, and Dad wasn't very happy with the Japs, but John changed him. You won't believe this. Yeah, John changed Dad. He had a dead hatred for the Japs. But anyway, he went to Japan, and this calculator, they just only started to make these calculators. Anyway, John brought this calculator back, and I can remember him giving it to Dad out there in the kitchen, and Dad said, that won't last long, it's a bloody Japanese thing. And Dad was still had it in the desk when he died and was still using it, and that was a fairly long time. But then John went and bought a Datsun 120Y car, and anyway, he's come home with this brand new car. No sooner got it home, Dad and Mum had it all packed up and went over to Western Australia, and thought it was an absolute great car. And Dad just kept on buying Datsuns after then. He had about 2 of them, I think, 2 or 3, I don't know, it's 2 or 3 Nissan cars after then. And he used to think they were pretty good. And so John changed and Dad changed his thoughts about the Japs, because they did make a bit of good stuff back there then. Yes.
Yeah, so John's curiosity was present from a very young age, but his involvement in rural youth, and particularly the study tour of 1974, kind of took that curiosity and experimentation to another level. He now had a group of friends from across the world and across Australia maintain those friendships in the US and the UK. Many of them are watching here. Greg Twelvetree, his very good friend, who he was all set to go and see when we had that lockdown. You know, we had that 5-day lockdown. John was ready to go and I didn't get over to see him at York Peninsula. Greg will be watching. He had a hip operation on Monday, so he can't be here. Also, Trish and Greg, George and Mary Code, Robin Jones, Pauline and Pat Brown have all contributed some of the photos. So, he was a really loved member of that group and would try as much as he could, he and Sue, to get to reunions. And we can see them here. You can see the kilts, they're women's kilts because that's all they could get. But it looks quite spiffy. There's that group of people. And yeah, they had a really good time. And Robin actually sent a sentence which I think sums it up pretty well. Tex, as we fondly called him, was a much-loved member of our Royal Youth Trip family. He was always quick-witted with a dry sense of humour. You always had a laugh when Tex was present. He will always be remembered. And he and Sue would really try to make those reunions, which meant travelling halfway around the country, always busy, but he felt very close to those people, and it's so good that so many of you are watching this today, so thank you. Thank you for the photos. Terrific. Okay, the two farms.
Oh, yeah. Dad, Dad always said there was always two farms there for us boys. There was Ardith and there was Woodvale, but we never. But he said, I need one to stay home and the other to help him out on the farm, and the other one to go out working. Well, John went out working, went out wall class. No, really, he started off. We started off with Peter Wilcox hay carting. John started off hay carting with Peter Wilcox, and Peter is still a great friend of John's, right up until he passed. But they used to go out hay carting, and then they go out fox shooting of a night too, with Mick Underdown. And back there then, foxes were worth more than our flying lambs were getting $35 for a skin. So it was pretty good money. But at any rate, when they went hay carting, it was the same time, and I went out shearing a little bit. So I missed out on the hay carting, and I didn't like hay carting much at all. But left it up to them too. And then he started wool classing. I think that was right there. Yeah. Wool classing. He started wool classing, and his first start was rouseabouting. He roused around here with Dale Woodrow for a start, and then he went away with Darryl Stone up to, I think, Candiambo and Roxby Downs, I only think that. So the two sheds, anyway, he went away with Darryl Stone up bush there for a start, and that started his life out in the big country. And then he came back, and he took Craig Crawford and Jack James away with him, and they got washed in. For a month or so, I think. They couldn't do a blowout there because of wet weather. And I thought, Jack had a pretty good time, but the other two, I think, found it. They were bogged in and found it a little bit wet. But that was out at Wilcannia. I've probably gone a bit advanced here, but our first car accident. Our first car accident was when we were pretty young. Well, Dad used to feed out hay and that, and John and I would, Dad said, I'm going to feed some hay out, so he jumped down and said, you boys are in control of the steering wheel, you can take it in turns. Anyway, we're too busy bloody fighting. The next minute, bang, Luke's gone straight into a gum tree. So that's how far it moved. And that was, yeah, and that was one of starting the accidents off. And then we had the one that really got the town talking. We went to a cabaret at Mount Compass, and John had a really passionate with him from Raw Youth, and we left, we'd had a few beers and all that sort of stuff, and coming back, and John was all over the road, I thought, in any case. And I got past him just out from Maiponga, and when I arrived to Maiponga, I pulled up under a light out there at Maiponga, and I got past him, I was just stepping out of the car and opened my door and just stepping out of the car to wave him down. Bang! The car door goes flying. But we had two cars out of action, but we'd only just got one back from the crash repairs before. That was the first run it had, and we stuck two cars out of action in the one day. But anyway, Dad said, I don't know about you boys, he said, I've really wasted my time buying bloody farms. I should have been buying a crash repair business. But yeah, we used to have some accidents.
And I'll just tell the last two car stories. John and I had been playing tennis. I think we'd won. We'd had a few drinks. I'm not quite sure how old I was, but anyway. We were on our way home, just driving past Stones, and we're heading out and we were running a bit late, and we got in some gravel and the car rolled and over the embankment, and then it ended up being upright, and we just looked at each other, and there was a post that had just started to come through in between us, so that the roof was dented. Anyway, we didn't think much of it, and quick, we were all right. And we got out the car, went up to the Stones, got them to take, I think it was you, Daryl, took us back home, got another car, there was another car, and went out that night. Mum seemed to be fine about it. So when it came to me getting my driver's licence, there were no cars other than the ute, and it wasn't roadworthy. So Dad, Richard and John spent hours just getting the car roadworthy so I could use that to get my licence, because I did need my licence, and it was going to be a while until the other cars were fixed. So the policeman was very kind. He didn't make me rank, and I did get my licence, and it served us for quite a while, that ute. Okay, and back to John. So yeah, we were really best mates through that time and had a lot of fun together going out with all the Rural Youth crew. But he wasn't here for much longer, and he already had set his sights on wider horizons, and ended up following at the ancestors before and being in Western Australia. And he came to Esperance. Now, Esperance had many attractions. Firstly, it was 90 kilometres from any of the sheds, not like 500 to, Broken Hill and out there. So he liked the fact that he could base himself in Esperance and do the war classing. It was beautiful. It's a beautiful place. And Sue Howlett and her 3 children lived there. So it became the place that John settled. And right from the start, John and Sue were a team. And it was never, ever considered that they would return back to South Australia. And for the wedding, we flew in, I bussed in, and it was a big moment for our family. The honeymoon was a road trip around the southwest without the children, but I'm not sure whose idea it was, but I was invited on their honeymoon. An example of their generosity. We had a nice time, I never really asked the backstory. I think it was just, it's too far to go back to South Australia, so they thought I could come on their honeymoon. Purchasing the property out Coge and up east of Esperance became almost 2 decades of life for John as a drive-in, drive-out farmer. And he pioneered the adjustment of sheep all over the state, grew wildflowers to sell overseas, experimented with different pastures, and holidays would often involve the children with a range of jobs, picking the wildflowers, drying the wildflowers, moving sheep, setting out hay. It wasn't the carefree holidays that John's grandchildren have now. But there were time for swimming lessons, and I remember being there too, and family from the west coming in at Christmas time, and there was always big family gatherings. And when Deanne married Darren, he was working at Esperance Sheep Metal, and John's support and interest in the business resulted in him and Sue purchasing Esperance Sheep Metal. He soon realised that there was more money in making steel than being a farmer, although he continued to farm and run that business for several years. And that was, during a time when Mum and Dad were quite sick as well, and, they'd still be here when we needed him to. And when Tim returned from overseas, they really innovated and took the business to a new level. They travelled to China and to the steel making there, and, John came back and Tim just amazed at the quality of the steel manufacturing. They were early witnesses to what was happening in China. Often John was seeing things or would know of things before they really were known to the wider world. So he built trailers, toolkits, automatic sheep feeder, like one that you just leave in the paddock with a motor and you don't have to go to. It's there. If you look, you'll see it. You'll see the motor. Car-top camper designed that he built. I think Sue preferred the caravan, but it worked really well. Fit-outs for coffee and food vans. There's a photo there. Crutching cradles. Outlets for Pioneer tanks, all stainless steel. And he employed 547 visa holders from the Philippines and found them to be really great workers and skilled and hardworking. So he was always looking at, how he could help other people and help the business and do something a bit different. And it thrived under John and Sue's and Tim's partnership. Sue was the accountant for many years, and she had her own innovative style for getting people to pay up. It was legendary in Esperance. I won't say any more than that. You can buy a drink or get a drink, and I'll tell you later. John and Sue were a steady presence and always there to offer practical help to the South Australian family. Sue came over to Moonta when our daughter Aisha was born, even though she had 3 children back at home and a business to run. They'd come over for Christmas whenever they could and did the long trip across the Nullarbor many more times than we did to there. And as Mum and Dad's health declined, they'd both be here at critical times for us.
I might go back to John and Sue's wedding. We went to a party one night at Alan Clavy's, and Andrew ran to Graham Carthy and he said, "Oh, how's your brother going on?" I said, "You won't believe this, he's getting married tomorrow." And Graham Carthy's brain ticked over, click, click, clock. And in about an hour, he'd organised a plane, a pilot, and about, I don't know how many others, Alan Clavey, David Eads, Mary and myself. and the pilot. And off we flew, and we made it for the wedding. And and we done about and with the plane, we used to charter the plane. We done a couple of other trips over. Just to, John was pretty busy sometimes, and with his sheep, and we chartered the plane a couple of other times, and we just used to have to put the pilot up, but just pay for the plane. And it was about 11 hour. Doesn't matter, whenever we flew, sometimes we flew with a bit of a wind over, but it was an 11-hour trip there and back, sometimes 4 hours one way and 7 hours the other. But it depends which way the wind was blowing. John was around for me. I got cancer years ago, about 12 years ago, and it was a fairly big one actually. It's a 4.9 kilo cancer they took out of my tum-tum. It was growing off my kidney fat, and it just happened to be at a busy time of the year. I had sheep to sell and shearing to be done. John turned up and took over running the show, and that was the same time Sue had she got liver cancer, and John came over and gave me a helping hand. And then there was, when I had my last attack, I had a busted aorta and a stroke down the left-hand side. John turned up again, and him and Jan and Shelley turned up on the scene back there then. And the whole three of them sort of looked after me and got me going again. And I got going again, and I couldn't believe it. John never was ever sick. But that was the crunch of it. And here I was just a big crook. John, and I'll go on to I'm going to tell the John and Shelley met down at my place here at Huntingdale. She was a friend of Jan's and was helping them out, and one thing led to another, and they went off down to Raywood Nursery to pick up some plants, and John said, "I'm going to head off down to Mount Gambier with Shelley and put these plants in," and so off they both went, and we were halfway in between. John would be with some pass, the lawn, and that's how often they used to go backwards and forwards. The lawn needed cutting, and bang, off they go, cut the lawn, over to Esperance or down to the mount, and off they go. And then John and Shirley decide they go up, do a trip right up to Broome, went right up top end for 3 months. So sort of, it could have been longer than that, a few months in any case. They travelled right up top of Broome, down to over to Darwin and down to Catherine, down to Ayers Rock or Uluru, and then back home with Ted the dog. So, and then a long relationship, short relationship there with Shirley and John.
And I'll just talk briefly about the time when Sue was sick and trying to find out what was wrong with her. And they ended up at Crawford House, or Crawford Lodge, which is a cancer treatment place in Perth for people travelling from the country. Now, our ancestors saw a great grandfathers, so Auntie Doreen and Uncle Algernon were our great-grandfather's brothers, and they set up Crawford Lodge. And there's actually a piece in the paper that I've given you from the manager of the lodge about John coming to him and about the book that has been written about Crawford Lodge. They saw firsthand how important that facility was. And so when Sue did die, it was pretty tough for a period, but it didn't take long for John just to get back on his feet and back in the car. He loved to be in the car and adventuring, and all up through the Gawler Ranges where our family had been, and just literally followed in the forebears' footsteps all the way across, and putting everything together with Huey and Dougie the dog. And we're very grateful, our family, for John's work, and so is Crawford Lodge and Milroy Lodge in Perth. The contributions are incredible, and something like 10,000 people have used those services since it opened. The book was completed in the free moments he had between visiting Richard, taking him to appointments, cooking. He did a fair bit of cooking, arguing, joshing and bossing Jan, and then the steady stream of visitors that would come and go. And we all know the story of John rushing here when he heard that Richard had burst an aorta, and that Craig and John were planning the funeral. But there'd been a miracle, it was just extraordinary. We were so happy. He pulled through so well. And so as Richard and I, Jan, we became aware that John was in Flinders on the morning of the 3rd of February. Richard left the golf course, I left my place, and we had this, we knew that he was still alive, that he was, this hope that we would get up there and that there would be another miracle. But because, just the night before he'd been joshing with the nurses, and he'd run just about everybody on his list that day, which maybe told another story. And as John could be in any of many places at any given time, we're all used to him not being with us physically. But he had a way of being present in our lives, no matter the physical distance between us. He stood up to whatever life handed him. He'd just keep bouncing back. He had a knack for being there for others, even when he was facing his own personal challenges. His phone calls were often on the long side, and always interested to know how everyone was, sharing his adventures, his discoveries, having a laugh, and rubbing in another eagle's win. Whenever his presence was really needed, he could move at lightning speed and would be there. And so many of us here watching today are witness to his care. John wouldn't want us to go on and on about what an extraordinary man he was, but the truth of it, he was. And our lives are so much better for having him with us.
And on that note, can I just invite Carey Hughes to come up and just say a few words on behalf of the Hughes family, because we know John has become very important to them over the last couple of years.
Hello everybody, I'm Carey, this is Nicole and Kate. We'd just like to say a few words on behalf of our family. First of all, our deepest sympathy to all John's family and friends. This is a bit of a story, but we first heard about John in conversations on how happy Mum was since meeting him, and we're like, who's John?
Dick's brother. Who's Dick? Jan's husband.
Yeah, right. Anyway.
None of us knew who John was. But Little does Mum know, in the months into the lead up of finally meeting John, we had a bit of an in-house joke, right down to our youngest of the family, 4-year-old, on cue. Whenever someone would say, "Who's John?" Harry would come out and say, "You know, Dick's brother. You know, Jan's husband." So it was a bit of a joke.
Yeah, and he inherited the name John Boy. So, you know, little 4-year-old come out, "Hey, John Boy," so that was good. So once we finally met John in person, John Boy had a big part of our family, and like he'd been there forever. All the kids loved John with his games and the interest he showed in whatever they had going on at the time, plus his sense of humour. Most of all, we loved the way he swept Mum off her feet and treated her like the gentleman he was. John also took Mum on a trip of a lifetime across Western Australia and the Northern Territory and done things only they could share. With all this, we could say thank you to John and for making Mum so happy. We're grateful to have had you in our lives. And it may have been a short time, but love forever. Thank you.
We'd like to thank Dick and Jan, because if it wasn't for you guys, Mum and John wouldn't have crossed paths. And also for everything you've done and times shared throughout Mum and John's time together, especially in the past few months with John's hospital visits. We'd also like to thank you guys and Rose and Alastair for putting together this beautiful day to celebrate John's life. Cheers to a wonderful man, and may he rest in peace.
Thank you.
Oh, it's sort of a bit of a wind up from all these speeches and that. Either we've bored you or put a bit of a smile on your face. But anyway, I'd like to thank Roxy there for doing a bit of the camera work and all that sort of jazz. Paige and Steve. Paige for organising the show. And Steve for the facilities here and setting it up. And then I'd like to thank Mike and Janet Hill for putting this place here together. It's a lovely outlook, looking straight down onto the fairways and straight to the sea. It's absolutely lovely. Thank you there, Mike and Janet. And I'd like to thank I'd like to thank Brother John for being my brother, and I think the toilet light's on.
So that toilet light that Mum always had is lighting the way, and we appreciate all of you being here today, and thank you. We feel very blessed to have had John as our brother, and we'd like you to now celebrate his life with us and have a few drinks and something to eat.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rose. One more, Rose. I'd like to thank Rose. She held herself together. I sort of found it a little bit hard.
So you've knocked off for a smoker, and you'll be back later on. Hey, true blue.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, there is now food and drink. I'll
Drinks brought around.
Okay, you do it.
We've actually finished 15 minutes early, so food won't be here until 12:30. But there is a bar tab, and I'll just go and let them know, and they can start bringing some beer and some wine around to the table. So you can mingle a little bit if you want to, and thank you.
Hey, true blue. Don't say you've gone. Say you've knocked off for a smoker. Hey, true blue. To me straight, face to face. I get really disappearing. Just another